Welcome everyone to the second episode of the podcast. This is the Hot Squish podcast. We probably wouldn't have said it in the last one because we were kind of coming up with a name. But due to high demand, we've decided to come back with a second episode. This episode is going to be dealing with probably social media maybe. But it may go off in different strands. But yeah, I hope you enjoy. Hot Squish. So yeah, of course social media is probably on our age group or Generation Z, millennials.
I don't know,
yeah.
We're falling through the cracks.
We're Vine, you know.
We're Vine kids. But I even think we're like maybe a year too young for Vine maybe.
I never
slightly
really
in that
caught
age.
it, but I didn't catch on to many.
I liked Vine almost. I still watch a few Vine videos.
We were
funny.
Nintendo DS,
Yeah, oh yeah.
not
Yeah.
Game Boy.
Not
whatever
Game
came after.
Boy. Not,
Yes, that's perfect.
And not mobile gaming, like it was.
Yeah.
It was 10 or the PSP. Do you come into?
Yeah. I never had a Nintendo DS.
Oh, we had one, yeah.
Oh,
Probably for the better.
Yeah.
I had one. It was good. Now, to be fair,
Yeah.
I remember getting PES 06 on it. That was the days when Adriano was there.
Oh yeah. Did you have the FIFA where you could, when you were taking free kicks, you could just with the stylus draw where you want the ball to go?
No.
That was absolutely Robert Carlos, like every single one of the top bins from 40 yards out.
Do you remember the Wii? They had like FIFA 09 or something.
And you
And you could like shake people and everyone falls to
Oh
Shit.
no! I think
Fine.
one of my friends had like FIFA. I think 12 or 14 or something. We played it there like a good few months ago in the Wii, and like it's ridiculous. Like you could do like 30 or 40 yard long shots, and the goalkeeper was just inept. It's a bit like the GA games that you get in PS2,
Yeah.
and like you could shoot in the halfway line of hurling and just get a goal.
Those
Pretty
are the
bad.
days.
They're bringing a new rugby game actually. You see that?
Are they?
Yeah.
The
yeah,
Rugby
it's-
Challenge 4.
Yeah.
Rugby Challenge 4.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's-
yeah, watch that. That was,
Yeah, it's not great. But we tend to get it anyway. Just
It doesn't have any of the Irish teams in it. It's just the
No,
Southern
no.
Hemisphere teams in it.
Right,
But
get my money so.
no. Like that.
so yeah, I think it's since we've really been born, social media has played somewhat a part in some of our lives. It depends on the person. I think that's actually the main thing that we have to talk about with social media is that it has a different influence for everybody. You know, some people like obviously now at the minute the craze is TikTok. That's huge at the minute. But then for others, then Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Visco, what else? Is there anything else?
Bebo. What was it?
MySpace.
MySpace was
Yeah.
the original, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think MySpace was the original.
Yeah.
But
Ask FM, classic.
oh god, yeah, Jesus. But Ask FM is like this
like-
stereotypical, like it, yeah, like that was just genuine. Like if you think of like a site that was bullying, like it was Ask.fm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in this episode we're really going to discuss basically, well, pros and cons, because there are pros and cons to each, even though depending on your own opinion there may be overwhelming on one side to the other. So I think it's best if we take it from the pros first. It might be difficult, it might be easy, but what are the pros to social media?
I suppose just information. I mean, I feel like that's where I get most of my news. If not, well, I might know, like I like to read the paper or the Irish Times, but if there's breaking news,
Yeah.
that's where you get it from. That's where you hear different takes, which is obviously a good thing. I think,
Maybe hearing more voices, possibly.
Yeah, I think it is a platform for free speech, and I think that is always
Well, we can debate that later on, I'd say.
yeah.
In its essence, in its most purest form, without that probably is the best way of saying it, in its purest form, that it is just a platform for people to speak of their opinion. But the thing is, with a platform like that, and like any platform, there is going to be contrasting opinions. But it's whether, and I think it's accepting of those opinions in one hand, but obviously if it's an opinion that is, something like racist, homophobic, then that of course isn't okay. But like certain opinions.
There's a debate at the moment as to whether a social media site like say YouTube or Facebook, are they simply a platform or are they a publisher? So if you're a publisher, you can have some sort of control of what you're putting out there.
Bit of curation.
But if you're to be in the clear sense of the word just a platform, then you kind of have to let anyone put whatever they want on it.
Yeah.
Which now, I mean, you know, obviously there's no one envies the job of the Facebook content reviewers.
No, Jesus. I can't
Them
imagine
lads,
anything
like-
worse. Well, once they could, but pretty horrible.
You'd be siphoning through some horrible stuff.
Oh, really bad. So obviously, like, I'm not arguing for that everything should be let on there, but there is a case as to who decides what's, you know, too far beyond the pale to be put on the platform.
You know, the argument is all like the argument was made, especially like when we were in college. You know, if you take Wikipedia, like we were told to never use Wikipedia whenever we were using making any sort of essays because it wasn't peer reviewed.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you could say the same. Like when you read something by the Irish Times, that guy is putting his reputation on the line in that piece. While if you take social media, for instance, it's just somebody saying their opinion. You know, which is right and which is wrong. Are they both right? But just
But the Irish Times wouldn't be peer reviewed either. Like if the Irish Times isn't necessarily fact checked, like we don't know that that's not. I don't want to be skeptical about all media here because I'm not. But like the Irish Times has a slight agenda, you could say. If you're looking from a certain lens, they have an ethos. They're a published paper. They're not fact checking absolutely everything, and they have opinion pieces.
But I think from the it would depend on the journalist though. But if a journalist were to have been found not like if his article was seen to be misleading or false, that would ruin his reputation. So it would be in his best interest for it to be true.
Yeah, I suppose it would ruin his reputation if his goal was to be as even-handed as possible, and it was the paper's view to be as even-handed as possible. But I mean, there are certain media outlets who are, you know, staunchly hold a certain view, like on the right, Breitbart News, and on the left, it's well, wouldn't be as extreme. I think Huffington Post is seen as kind of like this, like, you know, predominantly left views, and if they're okay with it, then, you know, then if the person doctors the facts a little bit for their piece to suit that view, then they're not going to get called out because their readers aren't going to call them out.
Yeah.
You know,
there's a bit of an echo
chamber.
chamber.
Yeah, an echo chamber, exactly. The guy Tim Urban who writes the Wait But Why articles, he did a whole thing about echo chambers versus idea labs. Where idea labs where you have people saying different opinions based on things that they've thought of, you know, or researched or whatever, and people going, oh, that's different what I'm thinking, well, let's figure this out, and our third person comes in and goes, well, actually this person's right here. Or our echo chamber is just everyone's just agreeing with you, you know.
Well, I think there's in a certain sense, the papers or the news media, like anything else, are a slave to the market. Like if people generally want to hear, I would say that people in this day and age, anyway, generally want to hear things that they agree with, or that kind of validate their worldview.
Yeah.
So say if you're a Breitbart reporter, you know, you're not going to be like, no, I'm not saying you're not going to be like, there's a gender spectrum, or say, like, just to pick one issue, like, if you were to be like, oh, there's gender is a social construct on Breitbart, you're probably not going to keep your job for very long. And I'd say the same would happen on the other side, where it's, if you go against the ethos of the paper, you just might not be what the company's looking for. So I don't think there's a real objective truth in the media at the moment, or none that everyone agrees on anyway, which is probably a problem.
Do you think there ever has been?
I think there was a lot more commonly accepted truths that there aren't anymore, maybe.
There's maybe a point to be made there that everything is simple or seems pretty straightforward and you don't really know too much about it, and the minute you start actually looking into it you realise, oh, this is actually grey area and there's actually no really right or wrong here. And maybe because of social media and the amount of new information, it's harder to just be like, oh well, it's like this, because you're going to have 100 people who can reply to you instantly and be like, no. Where maybe someone wrote in a paper 100 years ago, people wouldn't know that there was anything different because that was their source of information.
Yeah, it
but
was
now
their only
people are
source,
like, oh
yeah.
well, I heard this tweet, I saw this opinion, and it might be wrong, but some of them are going to be right. You know, and I think it's just becoming harder to just gloss over things, be like, oh, it's like this, because people now know it's actually not like that.
I think it's funny that in that landscape on social media, you'd think that would lead to a less polarized political
Yeah, you
debate,
think.
but it does the exact opposite somehow.
Yeah.
Because like you think, oh well, there's so many different voices, and you kind of pick what you agree. You can basically cherry pick then what you agree with,
yeah.
which means that you just get so much hate online, which is really
Yeah, well, one of the arguments for that is that because people can pick who they want to listen to, and now this is a wider variety of media, so people can pick what, like Breitbart, Huffington Post didn't exist, even the Journal didn't exist until like 20, 15 years ago, less for some of them. So you now pick what you listen to. So now say if you're the Irish Times, and you're used to be like, and it's an institution kind of in Ireland, like it's really central, and now they're going, oh, actually people who read our paper, used to read our paper who had right-wing views, they're now all reading whatever, something else. So then they like poll their readers kind of, or like just see what their reaction are, and realize, oh, okay, the average political opinion of our whole readership has gone to the left. Well, we need to follow it. You know, like you're saying, and it lets them go more for the left, and the same things happen on the right.
So whatever sells.
So the right are like, oh Jesus, look. So some other papers like, geez, like 90% of our readers agree with this, which would be considered quite a right wing statement. But then we'll just, you know, we'll lean into that. That allows them to even be more right, and the debates just become more polar because.
And do you think then that the real mandate for being as truthful as possible should fall on the state news, like say RTE in Ireland? Do you think that they have a responsibility to try and be as factual as possible?
I mean, you'd like to say yes. I mean, you can imagine in reality it's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
These people's salaries are being paid by government, you know, but they're
They're
going
gonna
to push
reflect
their
the
agenda a little bit, yeah.
I wouldn't classify it well, like especially like RT might be a bad example because as a news outlet it is quite poor in its reporting. BBC, relatively based, is not as bad for reporting news as it is. But
would you say the BBC is unbiased?
That depends wholly on who's at the top. Not politically now, as in, but who's at the top. There's a lot of. I think at any sort of state media outlet, I think in general, I think we should probably take the basis. You know, if you take America for instance, there's essentially Fox is Republican, CNN is Democratic, and they've stated that claim. You know, even if you go to the Sun back. 98 I think, maybe even before that, when Tony Blair was first running for Prime Minister, the Sun put out a front page which says the Sun supports Labour.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's like, that is something that I don't know, that's a clear stance, and you're aiming towards a clear and concise group of people there, and that, like, you know what I mean, the paper can do that. They can do that because that's not against the law, supporting one political party. But I think with people nowadays, we have this access to so many platforms that I think it's like there's so much information that we've actually cocooned ourselves because, you know, like if let's say, an example maybe, you know, even if we take the Brexit for instance, or even like 2016. So 2016, if you take about Brexit and you take about the presidential election, you had, on the one hand, in Brexit, you had the use of science and analytical data to change the minds of voters through subliminal messaging through Facebook, and these ads now have become more prominent, and and it was the same in the Trump administration, that they ran an ad campaign that was like, you think about the Trump, like for most people when you think about the Trump election campaign, you think of it as a bit mad, as a bit unprofessional, but actually it was the most professional election campaign ever ran. That it used fine scientific data and statistics on people that they didn't even know themselves, and was able to microanalyze each state. In Florida, each like borough was microanalyzed, and they were given specific ads that would support their cause. So then, you know what I mean, those messages kind of go into your head. But I think if you want to get past that, you have to be willing to view both sides of it and multiple sources. But the problem is that I think there's so much information there that we just get like a rabbit in the headlights.
Yeah.
You know? And
and even the fact, like, even on, say, social media, you pick who you want to follow.
Yeah.
And you're happy with that. And, like, if someone in your echo chamber or your followers says, or in that kind of group, says something against the status quo, like, people like tear them apart. Like,
people jump on them. I think it's a real problem.
Yeah, 100% is.
There's no room these days for someone having a different opinion.
Yeah.
If you have a different opinion, you are vilified.
Yeah.
You are evil. You know, not that you disagree on the subject.
Yeah.
It's that your whole
say
you're
worldview
racist, or something ist anyway.
Yeah.
You know, like straight away. It's always that way.
Do you know the thing with the Shelburne Hotel? They got rid of those
the
statues, and when that happened, the day that happened, Kieran Ferry, I'm pretty sure it was Kieran Ferry, said it. I think he's a Green Party councillor maybe, and he put up and he was like, they shouldn't be allowed to do that. He's like, no one. He's like, does anyone have any proof? Like, this is a listed structure. You can't just start taking statues off it. Like, that's really against the law. You can't do that.
Yeah.
They should have consulted someone. Like, who let this happen? And people attacked him, or were like, so you're saying it's okay to have racist statues? Like, don't say that, Kieran. And people I thought respected were like tearing him apart, who I also respect. And I was like, oh, who do I believe here? And then a day later, all came out as like, oh no, they weren't safeguards at all. They were like.
I have a question about that though.
Yeah.
Why does that make it okay to have? Like, what difference does that even make? If they were aristocratic women, apart from being slaves.
Yeah.
Because nobody's looking at the context behind. Like, we could say they were Egyptian and African aristocratic women, which means they probably had slaves.
Yeah.
So then you could, like, with that logic, you can prove fucking anything. Like, I just think that it's a very mob thing what's going on at the moment.
Yeah.
It's not like people are judging with the passage of time and really looking into, oh, this actually is a bit problematic, it's not great.
Yeah.
We should probably take it down. Dublin City Council weren't even approached.
No. The manager is just like, this looks bad, so I'm going to do it without looking into
overnight.
it.
But that's where you get, like, because it's business, like, that looks good for his business.
Yeah.
If he's signalling that, oh yeah, I'm not having any of this.
He was just looking for the good reaction of, oh, woke Shelburne Hotel, and he didn't probably give a fuck what this.
He wasn't even looking for the reaction. He was looking for the money that follows the reaction.
Yeah.
That was it. Like, and it's no more cynical than that. Anyone who thinks that if a company takes down a dubious statue, that they're doing it because they really believe in the cause, or even like a company offsets their green,
house emissions,
or like their carbon emissions. It's not because they care about the environment, it's because they want your money. That's basically it.
That's true, yeah. And we should probably note that we don't, like, if the statues have been seriously problematic and been issues, like, I don't think any of us would have been against taking them down. No, I think we agree with the process that.
But I think you have to actually judge it properly. You can't just be going around ripping up the city.
But at the same time, I think you, like, the Green Party candidate there, he's open to that opinion because he's making that opinion based on the information that he had at the time, and that's the thing, you know what I mean? Like, if you say something, like if he said that and then a week later somebody comments on it saying, oh well, why did you say this? Almost like there's a week between that there. You know what I mean? You're entitled to change your opinion, but I think there's, especially online, you can see the arguments are very much right and wrong rather than like
100%,
a middle ground where you're like, okay, well, it's okay, like if one person believes in, let's say if one person believes in high taxes while somebody believes in low taxes, so like a high corporation tax versus a low corporation tax, it's okay for somebody to believe in either side because either side there is viable options for either side. But on social media it's like, oh, I want to win the argument because then I am justified then. It's just a kind of social justification.
To be fair to that, I don't think he could have picked a less controversial subject.
I could have
could have gone a lot worse.
Yeah. It is. It's different.
But it's just an example, really.
It's a good example.
Do you know what I mean? Where there is a middle ground rather than it being so, like with some cases it could be said that it's fact or fiction, but I think with something like that, I think there's like, and I think it kind of draws us in then to, I think, a kind of a broader context of, especially when people are talking on social media, is the kind of this image that people want to kind of, especially what we're saying about the Shelbourne, is like, why did the Shelbourne do it? And they did it because they wanted to give off an image of, like, you know what I mean, we support, or like, not
It's all optics.
yeah, you know, well, not,
Yeah,
I'm not saying
well,
that Shelbourne don't support, or like they're
Yeah,
pro slavery or
I know
anything like
you're
that.
not saying
Yeah, but they are, you know what I mean, everyone now is so conscious on what other people think about them, that I think it is something that is certainly going to be an issue in the long term, especially with social media, is that people will be very conscious of what people think about them.
That's a very good point.
You
I
know,
didn't think about the connection there.
yeah.
And like, you know, when you're looking at social media, you're always, if you're projecting anything, you're reading the comments that people put up.
Yeah.
If you put out anything, like nobody's immune to that. Like nobody's immune to, you know, what people think of them.
Like when you put up an Instagram post, or if you put up any sort of post, you know, like you'd be lying if you said you didn't look at how many people liked it, or
Yeah,
anything,
or
and then
who
you can,
liked it.
yeah, and you compared yourself to that. Well, I think that kind of, especially with Instagram, especially, that's something that had became extremely apparent, that like it was all about, oh well, like this person got this many likes, this person has so many followers, and suddenly this person is better because they got more. You know what I mean? Rather than just accepting who you are. And it's very difficult nowadays for young people to kind of really accept who they are, because we live in this kind of society where, you know, especially with social media, that's very like that.
Your worth is your aesthetics, or your
What you have. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, you know, if you get a brand new watch, you take a picture on Instagram and you're pretty much just showing off the watch.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Just to
Yeah.
show off to other people, but other people, like,
People respect that. That's the weird thing. People like look
Yeah.
at that and they're like, oh yeah.
Oh, good.
You know,
He's been hustling.
but
Yeah.
some people react differently to it. But I think, you know, I think we should just be like, rather than viewing people based on, well, we were talking about kind of not assets. What's the term for probably? I can't think of it. But aesthetics. Yeah, we should somebody based on what they're truly like. You know.
Yeah.
Someone said to me who has gone back to college, he was like a church student in my course, and he said that he couldn't imagine being our age now compared to like being 18, like when he was 18. He said like the pressure young people are under to be a certain way, to have a certain image. He said like when he was in college, like everyone was a mess, and like everyone knew each other was a mess. And he said something I thought was so strange. He goes, one thing I never understood when I came back. He's like why no one was like, why none of you were getting at each other. He's like, when I was in college, everyone was just fucking riding everyone and shifting everyone, and like didn't kind of matter, because it's like, you know. But now everyone is so uptight and anxious. And it's just a weird thing. I was like, why did that happen? He's like, it's like this idea that everyone's going to know, or that like, you know, so everyone will leave it behind or something. It's just the idea of constantly being connected makes you.
There's more of a
afraid to do
trail.
things.
It's an interesting. It's because everyone's kind of walking on eggshells around each other.
Yeah.
To a certain extent.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point.
I just never heard it before. He was like, everyone needs to get with everyone like on a night out and they have a laugh about it the next day. It's like, no one does that.
But now there's consequences.
Yeah.
Because if you like, say if there's a photo online of you and
Exactly.
or something that you might be not ashamed of, but maybe wrongly that you shouldn't be ashamed of, but say you were, like you're maybe ashamed of getting at someone, and there was a photo of it online. That's online forever. There's no way that you can take that down.
Or even, I think just even the thought that people might be talking about you, and when social media exists, that possibility is always there. Like, you know, during COVID, social media, you're going to be like, well, I know no one's talking about me because no two people are together to talk about someone because everyone's apart. But now it's like people could be talking about you all the time, and I think that's a subconscious.
Yeah.
Do you know what it kind of seems to me? It seems like decentralized surveillance nearly.
Yeah, it nearly is.
There's, you know, like in
It's a non-governmental,
but it's decentralized. So like
we're
anyone
actually
could be like, you don't know who you're going to run into.
Yeah.
You can always have to have your best side out.
Yeah.
There's a bit of anxiety maybe.
but we're actually surveying each other in a weird, strange way. Yeah. But how do you well, this is $1 million question, but how do you get over that?
Get off social media.
You know, and then gradually just kind of accept who you are and then move forward.
Okay, if I tell you have to delete all your social media tomorrow, what would be your reasons not to? What would be like your top What would you?
What app would you be? What app would you miss? Maybe?
Yeah.
Probably maybe Snapchat, because I use that to talk to people.
Yeah.
But apart from that, I would have no issue deleting the rest. I'd have no issue deleting Facebook. Same with Instagram. I use Visco, but the thing is it's difficult to really classify that as a form of social media.
Yeah.
It's more just kind of a platform to put up pictures.
Mm.
But also I with Visco, there's no real ads or anything. This is more like an ad for Visco.
And
But
would you miss YouTube?
Yeah, I do like YouTube,
Yeah.
but at the same time,
That would be the one now that I would.
Yeah.
That's basically the only one I've left on my phone.
But
I
I
know it's
wouldn't-
not really.
I wouldn't
No,
classify it as social media.
Well, it kind
Realistically,
of is though. It's kind of not, but it kind of is. It's
yeah.
not classical social media, I suppose. It's
Like-
more a platform, but.
The way I would look at it is like there is times that I have gone on Instagram, I've gone on certain social medias, and I have left Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and I have gone one of those four that I have gone on those, and I have been in a worse mood after being on it.
Mm.
And when I realised that, especially with Instagram, I was like, well, that has to go.
Oh, Instagram is awful.
Like it
delete
really has to go.
After a couple of days,
You know.
it's so much better. Like,
Yeah.
it's just you're not thinking about it then. You don't have to. It's not weighing you down at all.
Yeah, and I think, especially, obviously you may feel like, oh, well, like this emptiness when you delete it, but after a while then, you know what I mean, it's not an emptiness as such, but it's actually just kind of a freeing feeling.
Mm.
Yeah.
But I think, the thing is, it's like all a piece, like social media. We could be saying this right now, and you could be sitting there saying to yourself, well, I love Instagram and I have no issues on Instagram. That may depend on who you follow.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Or how you use it.
Yeah, like I looked at a research paper that said that, like, one side said that there are negative effects mental health wise with using social media, and another was like there isn't any actual concrete evidence. So, it's kind of, it all depends on what your impact is by it and who you follow, like whether you get engaged with it as much as others.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think but I think especially with Instagram and Facebook, I think with those two especially, because they are owned by Facebook, that they have got heavily populated with targeted ads, and you just feel like a number, and you feel like it just doesn't feel as, it's hard to describe, but it just doesn't have the same nice feeling that it had at the start.
Mm. Yeah.
Very targeted, yeah.
Like my younger brother, who's like squarely Gen Z, he said none of his friends go on Instagram anymore. So it's become too commercials, too many ads.
Yeah.
He's like, it's not fun anymore. you
Yeah.
know.
So what does he use then?
TikTok, that's all they use. They don't. He's like Instagram, Snapchat to message people, TikTok to like have fun, whatever, and see stuff. He's like Instagram is just dead.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
one other thing that I know is that if you told me like, oh, I have to delete all social media, my number one concern would be like, if I want to be an artist, keeping up to date with what other people's work.
Yeah.
You know, and even I went to apply to this thing because all end of year shows have been cancelled. The IDI, which is like the Irish Designers Institute, are doing like an online show. So you submit all your work, and then professionals will look at it, and it's a really positive thing. But
Yeah.
to fill out the application form, you had to have a portfolio website, which is grand. I didn't have one, but I said, right, I can make one. There's like some really simple Adobe software. You can just like make them really
Yeah.
simple. It's like grand. But you also had to have a social media, like a whatever your creative field was. Say you're an artist, you had to have an artist's Instagram, and you had to put up your work, and you couldn't submit it if you didn't. So I had to make one. And I was like, well, that's
Yeah, it's annoying.
it's really annoying, So
Yeah, it's especially when, like, if you are running your own business, it is one of those things where
yeah.
there are still a lot of people on it, and commercially,
Yeah, it's a
social
no-brainer.
media is still a big player. Like, if you television ads are extreme. Like, television ads are very, not dead, but like
Yeah.
they get low
Can't-
traction.
You can't target them at all. Like,
Yeah.
at all,
And it's the same with newspaper ads, because less people are buying the newspapers.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it's trying to tap into the market, and Facebook have it really pretty much nailed at this point.
Yeah.
Even if you go back to what we're talking about with the Brexit and Trump, like, they had like their ability that you can really get inside the mind of people without them truly knowing it.
But do ads work? Like is it like, I don't think I've ever looked at an ad on any social media or on telly at all. Definitely not on telly.
Yeah.
And been like, oh, I'm gonna buy one then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Definitely not consciously. No, I don't know.
Yeah, I think
can't say whether it works on me subconsciously.
I would say that ads work far more effectively on you than you think. I say it would probably be safer to say that.
Yeah.
Because subconsciously they do
well,
work.
maybe we're immune subconsciously because we don't have a subconscious according to
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was this guy called Pablo Bronstein, who's an artist, and he was basically saying that the 80s and 90s, the people born in that generation, everything was saturated in irony. And to it is to an extent now, like if you go on the internet, everyone says stuff and no one really takes it seriously because maybe there's kind of a get out clause because if people call them out, they can be like, it's only joking, like, you know, and then it jokes on you for reacting that way, and it's all like semi-serious and you say stuff you don't really believe. His art was kind of to do with that as well, and he was kind of making a point as well. He said he was growing up gay, he had to put on this like show, he had to act a certain way because he was afraid that if you act a certain way, people would like recognise him as being like gay and call him out and stuff. He said he had to do all the stuff that he didn't believe in, and he said that was just kind of the way it was. And he said the reason he was able to do that was because, like, if he left his friends, say we're here now together, and say after this we leave, we go home, and we've no way contacting each other, they said you spend all this time by yourself, you know, and you know when you end up like self-reflecting a lot and trying to figure out who you are and stuff. And he says once you have some idea like of you can see the you in you, then you can say these things and not really believe them because you know where you lie in all this. You know, you can say something untrue, you can say something true, and you can say both of them and be as equally comfortable saying both of them because you know that in where you still are in all of this. You know, you're not either of those things, you're still you, but you're just saying these things. But because our life now is so external, we don't have time to figure out where we are, and we kind of take everything up on its face value and we believe everything because that's like, we see stuff on Instagram, we just take it to be truth, and like all this fake news stuff, we see stuff on the internet, we're like, oh, it's got to be true. We never even time to think about it because we're constantly being fed this kind of stuff. And he didn't really expand on it long enough until I heard him talk for me to really understand it. But he's basically saying now that people are so you know, wired, and that they just, everything is. He said it was kind of tongue in cheek. He wasn't saying that like he actually believes this, you know, in the same way that he was just explaining. He doesn't actually believe it. But yeah, but the way of getting to the point is saying, well, people under 25 don't have subconscious, or they do have subconscious, but it's exactly the same all the way through. They don't have like an inner conflict. They just have everything is just true all the time, or like everything is as it is. Where he said, you know, you kind of, it's not as clear, you know.
Would you say like we're like just flying through life without actually taking just that second to think about anything, that there's so much hitting us. Basically, is this kind of what you're saying? There's so much hitting us that we're just flying through and we're not actually thinking about it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's kind of a tricky concept to get your head around.
Well, it rings true to me, like, because I mean, you say that, like, I think I kind of get what you mean. It's like, if you're, you know, you're constantly looking at something on your phone, you're not giving yourself a time to just think about nothing or whatever. Like, you might then go take a shower, and then you have nothing else to be doing, like, you know, and then you might start thinking about whatever's ailing you.
Yeah.
But it happens to me, like, if you're going on the bike or whatever.
Yeah. Like,
sometimes I listen to the radio, but if I'm not, then you're just thinking, you know.
It's just you, yeah.
So if you kind of take the time to have nothing going on.
Yeah.
Like I can find it extremely difficult to switch off and just stop thinking about stuff. Like I just constantly thinking about stuff. Like not exactly news related, could be anything, work, could be anything like that. But I think trying to get into, like, especially like I use the Calm app. I use that every so often if I'm getting stressed out. I'll play that and it'll play piano music, or it'll just play like even just rain.
Yeah.
And you listen to that, and you can find. I listened to a podcast, and this guy was talking about how important breathing exercises are. That if you can get regimented on to do a breathing exercise routine every day, how much better you feel. It's like a form of yoga. And he said like that even taking huge breaths in through your nose, that your nose actually it filters out the oxygen and it comes into your lungs, and it is far better. But even he was saying that there was a guy that what was he doing? He basically he kind of just stood there, right, or sat there, and he had a towel over him, and he just was breathing and breathing, and he I think he worked up, I'm not entirely sure, but he worked up such a sweat that the towel was sopping wet.
Jesus.
But just by getting into a certain zone by breathing.
That's
But isn't
hard.
it crazy, like?
Yeah.
You know, but I think I think it's stuff like that. I think we have so much available to us that I don't think any generation before us has ever had, that I think we just kind of don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, and we don't know ourselves in it. I mean, like, how many people do you think, like, I think if you often had friends who, like, are in relationships, and it's hard to even know them from the relationship, you know, like, they've become kind of lost in it, because, and I think it's because maybe we don't have this time to just know who we are anymore.
Yeah.
And we're only just, our whole life is based on these interactions that we take to be true, and we've lost ourselves in it. And, oh crap, I forget, I was about to say something that actually tied in perfectly that, but I can't remember what it is. But, breathing exercises, yoga.
Maybe it's just a really sweaty person.
Well, actually, I'll give you a minute to think.
Yeah.
I was like, if, you know, oh God.
Gone, is it?
No, we look at other people, like this kind of culture of we look at somebody else and like, oh, like they don't, I wish I was like them. They just like are carefree and don't care about anything.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's the kind of, you know, I think at the same time, people, like, we should accept that, you know, everyone cares at a certain level. Do you know what I mean? Nobody is completely. Was it a narcissist? Is that the word that just like, or?
The narcissistic would be that you love yourself, basically. Like you think you're perfect, maybe aesthetically.
Yeah, but like even that, like, and that you just like don't care about anyone else, don't care about anything. You just care about like yourself, and you don't focus on anything else. I think it's impossible to have that viewpoint, that anyone has that.
Definitely not 100%. There are people who are definitely better at that than others, or maybe that they project outwardly it better.
Yeah, I think, but the thing is, even that, I think people that project this like claim of being great and all that, like we've all fallen for it, like myself included, so often. But you know what I mean. But I think once you kind of get past that, and I think if you can try your best to just be kind of like accepting yourself. I think this is even when we're talking about social media and we're talking about everything like this, it all keys in with a major thing, and it's like how we as people interact with a kind of one, it is only one small part of our life, which is social media. But I think yeah,
I remember what I was going to say.
Right.
It actually does tie this all a bit nicely together. This is a woman called Maria Smith and this guy Phineas Harper, and they're two really cool people, and they organised this event called Turncoats. It was basically like a kind of like a forum for people to come and talk, like a soapbox kind of, you know, speakeasy kind of thing. And they have like a provocative theme. It was all about, it's with architecture, but it'd be like fuck London, you know, because like it's all based on, like, one of them was just called fuck London, right? And you go in and there's like something, it's like theatre, something before to get you kind of jazzed up, and then you're like drinking, and then the stage is whoever wants it. People have these like kind of arguments or whatever, and they had all these rules. But one of them was that you can say something completely false that you don't believe in whatsoever, as long as it gets to the heart of what you're trying to talk about. So, an example would be that guy being like, oh, people under 25 don't have subconscious. He doesn't think that, probably, but it gets to the point of this argument, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you can say stuff, you can make up whole fairy tales that aren't true, as long as you get to the heart of the argument, right? But the second rule was no phones. You have to leave your phones outside, because like if people think they're being recorded, and people think that this is going to live on longer than the minds of people in this room, that they won't do it. And I was like, it's kind of the two arguments, or like, I think that's a good synopsis of what we're trying to say here, is that as long as people are aware that their actions and what they say will constantly be pushed out and could reach an ear that they don't want it to reach, they won't say things.
I think there's a certain irony that we're recording this then for a podcast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But I think,
is there something that we're not saying that if we weren't being recorded that we would say?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think like it is weird, like this is the second episode, but we're like, we can, it's only the second episode, but we fully know that the microphone's here when we're talking. I can feel it when I'm here.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like if this microphone wasn't here, I'd be less anxious than I am right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it is there. But what you're saying, Dave Chappelle is one of the greatest comedians of all time.
Yeah.
He has a rule that once you go into his show, that there's a pocket. There's like in America, this kind of this company that basically you put your phone into a pocket thing,
Yeah.
and like after the show then you collect it, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of like a club.
I think they did the same for the
Yeah.
circles. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much. You know what I mean? So, because he wants it no phones, because he wants people to concentrate on the comedy.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? And even like if you take, for instance, if you put your phone away and if you just sit down and watch a film, you know what I mean? How much more engaged you are with the film.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Even like when we
Much more
say,
you'll absorb.
yeah,
Yeah.
like if you take like even a small, very very small thing. So if you're in work and you're in your office and you're sitting there and you're on your computer, the difference between the work that you do with your phone turned up facing you
Yeah.
and your phone turned down is huge.
Crazy. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? If
Yeah.
you were to even put your phone, like I remember one, like early on and like in the lockdown, I'd go for a walk and I'd leave my phone in the house and I'd go out for a walk and I'd just be me, and I was like, this is the rare time like that anybody might like that, you know what I mean, that in my case that I am borderline untrackable.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, you know what I mean? I know that's a really weird
I
way
don't
of.
think you're worried about that, but
Yeah, I know, but do you know what I mean? That you're like, people talk about being off the grid. Do you know what I mean? But like, as long as you have your phone on you, you're never you're
Oh, yeah.
you're
You're
not
always-
you know what I mean, you're always connected somehow. But like, there is a certain freedom, and especially even, I find like sometimes, like whenever we meet up or sit down, we're chatting away. Do you know what I mean? If it's just us chatting, and then you know what I mean, if you're like, if you go to like a house party and everyone's on their phone, and you just take a step back and
Oh,
look
yeah.
at it, and you're like, how different it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That people's ability to converse is changed completely.
But how hard is it? How hard it is when you're in that situation? If you walk into a room and everyone's
Yeah.
on their phone,
What do you do?
how do you approach that?
But do you
Yeah, even if you're a group of people who aren't on their phones, the minute one person picks up their phone,
Oh yeah.
everyone else picks up their phone as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, oh, you're not listening to me.
It's a
Oh,
social device in
yeah.
some respects. If you don't want to actually
talk to me.
talk to people, you can just have it in front of you.
And do you think people now as well, Jakeem will probably spoke with this earlier, but then once the phones are put down and we're all sitting there, people are kind of afraid, like, what do we say because we don't want to offend anyone?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Rather than saying, you know what, like, let's do like this.
Rather than
don't-
having it out
just-
and
just
reaching
go-
some middle
Yeah.
ground,
Yeah.
actually listen to the two different points.
But I
Because
think
I think I'd be less afraid of saying something to offend someone who's in front of me, because at least we could, like say, have it out a bit. You'd be more afraid of saying something that offends someone and then not saying anything, but then putting it on social media or saying it
Yeah,
on
and-
social media.
That
Like,
happens all
that's
the- happens
the
all the
concern.
time.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
I don't like that. I wouldn't like that at all.
No, it's
Like if you're
not
going to
nice
have
at
an
all.
issue with something that somebody says, like you have to say it to them.
Yeah, and if I said something and it upset someone, and then they said this is what upsets me, and I was like, oh, fair, like that's like I never
Yeah.
thought of it like that.
rather
I
than
should
finding
understand
out from a third
yeah,
party.
Instead of finding out like, oh, you see, they were like fucking subtweeting you the last
Calling
time.
you
whatever.
big or something.
Yeah, and it's
Online.
like,
Mm.
like you don't feel any better about yourself then.
Yeah.
Neither do they.
And there's no progress made.
No, none. Yeah, you more than anything probably dig in your heels and be like, fuck
Yeah.
them, you know, because they make you feel terrible, you know. So
Yeah,
like,
even like if you take like the ability, I think people find it very difficult now on both sides of the fence. You know what I mean? Like when you have an opinion, you want to be right. You can't like, because then you're like, oh, it's like I convinced myself that I was right and now I'm wrong.
yeah,
And then there's like, then you really think about yourself. So you defend this small opinion as if
Yeah.
it's your life.
Like,
Do you know what I mean? That
So you don't
both.
have to confront your own.
Perhaps,
yourself, maybe,
you know, because yeah, in a way you could say
Yeah.
that, but you know, like if you have like, there's a guy on YouTube, his name is Stephen Crowder,
okay.
and he does these videos where he sits down in American college campuses. You should give it a watch. Like it is,
I've heard of it. I've seen
yeah,
it.
you know what I mean. He's quite a controversial guy. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
He'd be kind of put in the same circle as a kind of Ben Shapiro type.
Yeah.
But he would, anyways, go to colleges. He would sit down and he would have an opinion. He mightn't necessarily agree with that opinion, but he'll put out a yoke saying,
Yeah,
"Just debate me."
yeah,
So he would sit down then and he would talk. Basically, he would say that I think one of them was he basically saying he was pro wall, pro like Trump wall and Mexico border.
okay.
And so then he'd have a lot of people and then while he'd be having that debate, there would be people protesting this sit down
Yeah,
chat.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And then there would be
But the
people.
fact that he's there at all.
It's absolutely the fact that he's sitting there and he's discussing this, and then do you know what I mean? Then there'll be people shouting at him and this, which I think, you know what I mean. As much as his opinion that he may be having may be wrong to some, it's right to others. It's not like, do you know what I mean? So I think I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that having like
he should be allowed to have
he
the
should be allowed to
conversation.
sit
Well, he is
down
allowed
and
to have the
and he
conversation.
doesn't necessarily agree with that. Same
Yeah.
way as what you're saying about the debate that they have in the theatre.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It is a sit down conversation where you know what I mean. You have a
You can play devil's advocate.
yeah,
as well,
it's a
but-
group of free thinkers is probably the
Yeah.
phrase. Do you know what I mean? To sit down, discuss things, and you know be better off because of it. It feels like none of us are ever better off because of it because we're too kind of locked within a certain opinion.
Yeah.
You know?
Everyone's it's basically war really
Yeah.
on the internet. Like it's unbelievable. Like,
Yeah, and I think you have to-
see. Like,
Yeah.
and the sooner people just accept, okay, I've lost, and just move on, or not necessarily lost. You win, but you accept the L. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
But it's like your man Tim Urban says, like a scientist, like if a scientist comes up with a theory and he's build it from the scratch, he looks over people saying, he goes, oh, I have this like theory, he builds it up, and then it gets peer reviewed, so it gets debated,
Yeah.
and people are like, oh no, this isn't true because of this, or I disagree with this, and then they don't go, no, you're wrong, they go, oh yeah, you're right, or they
Yeah.
maybe have mind of retort, and then they build their opinion, or they build this theory further
In the right
in
direction.
the right direction. And I think it's because they're vulnerable, because they built it from scratch and they know, they're hoping that it's true, but like, you know, they're not sure. But when people know one fact, and because they know so little, I always find the worst argument again is when I know very little about the subject. So
Oh
I know
yeah.
one thing and someone starts to debate me, and I start backing myself up because I'm insecure, because I realise I don't know anything, you know?
Yeah. No, that is
And
that
I'm
is
like,
for
you're
sure.
wrong,
Yeah.
You're wrong, because I don't want to admit that I'm wrong, because I actually know in my head I probably am wrong, you know? Whereas if you are genuinely unsure if you're right or not, you're way more open to other opinions.
Yeah, and I think even accepting that you don't know a lot about a certain, like, you know,
Yeah.
like American politics is something that I wouldn't know, and like I would know I would know a bit about, but not an awful lot. I mean, if I was talking to, let's say, a guy who studied in depth U.S. politics, you mean, am I going to get into a debate with him? Well, I am within reason to get in with a certain level of a debate with him, but I'm not going to argue the fine details of
No,
it.
you let him use his superior knowledge to educate you a bit, and you can be like, oh, well, I learned, like...
But at the
well,
same
But
time,
there's
I
still
don't.
probably a value in your point.
Yeah,
Even if you're not fully right.
Yeah, there's no way to just completely just discredit someone, because I think some people are like, oh, like this guy got ruined, like he got, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I always they're absolute clickbait them videos.
Yeah.
They'd be like, you know, someone is destroyed with facts and reasons.
Yeah.
this kind of
Yeah,
stuff, like,
you know, and I think
It never happens, like,
No.
really.
no,
There's always a middle
a
ground
certain
somewhere.
middle ground, yeah.
Like, there's like 12, there's like a group, especially in the US, like US politicians, and they're basically playing like a reality TV show. Like, the media are portraying it as if it's a reality TV show. So it's like, one side is like Trump, like, who's big, like, you know, Mike Pence, like these like guys, and then the other hand,
John Bolton.
yeah, and then on the other hand, it's like AOC, you know, Cortez, you know, Alexander Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah, and then there's the girl, what's her name? She was on the Supreme Court panel, I think.
Oh, Nancy Pelosi, no?
Yeah, you're Nancy.
That's
Pelosi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have Clinton, of course, and you
Yeah.
have Biden, you have Sanders, and you have all those guys.
You've all these big characters, and it's issue like the news of them is like person A destroys person B. And
Yeah.
you could literally, you know, that's all it is.
It's entertainment.
It's
not
entertainment.
news.
It's not politics.
But
not
it's all aimed around getting that snippet, getting
Yeah.
that 20-second snippet that will be played in CNN,
And yeah,
and that, like, you know, like, I don't understand, like, these people, like this, an hour, like, you spend an hour after a political debate sitting down with, like, who won the debate,
yeah.
as if it's a boxing match.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
that's-
But I think at least in Ireland or on this side in Europe maybe, they do a better job of actually having some nuance. Like, say in our elections, like, it's not really like that.
No. Yeah.
Like they say,
It's
oh,
more
we
about
came
it's
better.
more about the manifestos,
If
which
someone
is
says,
important.
oh, like say between Mary Lou and
Mm.
you know, Micheál Martin and Leo, they had that big debate, and they say, oh, who did, like, they wouldn't say who won, they say who did better, and then the report
Yeah.
would be like, actually on this issue, like,
This
you know,
person
Mary
really
Lou had a
was,
great
yeah.
point, and
Yeah.
you know, they couldn't really refute her, and then say on another issue, like Micheál Martin, you know, he kind of won the floor that time. But it's not like, oh, this guy won, like.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, I remember when Sinn Féin got the most votes, people in Europe and in the media were kind of portraying it as like, oh, another populist victory sweeps Europe, like, you know,
Yeah.
like it was like they were fucking Marine Le Pen's group, and I was like,
Yeah.
no, the truth was that like Sinn Féin won because like Eoin Bryn's housing policy was, their housing policy was a lot stronger than anyone else's, and that was a big issue. That was one of the major reasons I think they did well, along with a couple of other issues that people were kind of tired of.
Health and sort. That's
Yeah.
But the IRA wasn't
No.
the issue that won them the election.
Exactly,
It's not like
no.
there was a fierce national.
Well, that was a gradual rise, especially for Sinn Féin. It was a gradual rise over time. So I think it was nothing. Like, obviously, we are seeing a bit of a populist rise in Europe. Well, I don't think it's. I
I'd
don't
say
think it's a
well-
rise anymore. I just think that's the way it is. But I think we are seeing far more the electorate now is far more divided. Same with
Yeah.
people. People are far more divided now than we may have ever been,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because we're given the opportunity to be divided.
Like
Which,
there's- you say that there's a rise in populism, but there's also like a big rise in like far left thinking and postmodernism.
Mm.
You know, these days in Europe, like it's in young people,
Yeah,
especially in
yeah.
colleges.
yeah.
It's very extreme, really.
Mm.
Like,
It
there's
is
not much
all
of a middle
so
ground.
extreme.
Well, like, it is brought up, like, let's think about how many people actually go into politics after student union politics. It's very few,
Really?
because they
All teachers.
get sick of, you know, they get student union politics is a not, it's a slightly worse version of real world politics, because you actually get to achieve not very much. If you take students union, for instance, you start work in September
Yeah.
and you go to the college with a proposal, and the college are like, okay, we'll get a board together and let's like hash this out, and then we have to discuss it. Then before you know it, by the time you have the board put together and everything, it's nearly Christmas.
Yeah.
Then you come back in February and you put it together, and the college like, kind of think about it again.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, then you're in student union.
You're
Like-
in the exams.
No, it's not the
You're well
exams.
into your
It's the
presidency.
campaign. It's the election again.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So that's the problem. It's this kind of, you can very easily lock a certain. I know this is kind of going in more. This is kind of delving into politics, but it kind of gets very much locked. And it's kind of can be the same in politics. People give out why there isn't so much change. It's because people that are afraid of change have the power to really stop it, and they can stop it with just admin and just, you know what I mean,
Yeah,
really bureaucracy. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to just think of, but at the same time I think like people view like conservatives as like, well, I think especially young people as like the enemy, you know. It's like,
Yeah.
no, you need conservatives and you need progressives to come have two alternative views and find the best one. Do you know, if we just changed everything, we'd lose a lot of good stuff too.
Oh,
yeah.
But if we stay the same, we realise it just falls in the system. And
Yeah.
you need both, and I think people have no respect for the other side.
There's no balance.
There's no balance. Yeah, you have
Well,
to be. Yeah.
This view that, okay, I support this party and I'm not going to look at any other party is so it's just such tunnel vision, because like if you were to take, right, your like team at the tournament, I like kind of like a bit of a sports reference, but like if you were to take, right, okay, who had the best housing policy out of any of the
Yeah.
like the parties that were running, you could probably say it was Sinn Féin.
Yeah.
Now you could say that it was optimistic housing policy, but at the same
Yeah.
time, that's open to
That's
debate
debate,
completely. Yeah, completely. But then you could go, okay, well, which party had the best health policy? Okay, Fine Gael.
Yeah.
And then which one had the best
Foreign policy. so-
foreign policy? You could say Fianna Fáil.
Yeah.
But you're willing to just straight away say that I'm only going with this
Yeah.
party here, rather than, okay, well, which one now
Yeah.
is going to, and then also then from within that, which person am I voting for is best going to represent me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we get locked in this party
Like,
politics.
You could
And,
vote for Sinn Féin who actually doesn't support the housing policy, and even though they'll have to vote for it, isn't going to actually make, like, would be a deterrent amongst the party internally, maybe. You know, like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
kind of
it's very
hard.
complicated.
But people are like so upset at the idea that you would vote for the wrong party. You
Yeah.
know, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
But they know it really. My problem is when it really destroys relationships and destroys like people's friendships and their ties to other people
Yeah.
because they can't look past it.
Yeah.
I think
Like
it-
it's only a small part of someone's life, like really.
Yeah, like one example I remember really well was during the 2016, like the year Trump got elected, and it was during the debates, and everyone was like, you know, my whole echo chamber Twitter was like, Trump
Yeah.
is terrible, like Clinton is good, and you know Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote those books, really smart guy, and he's really like knowledgeable, and he made a point during one of the debates, and he was, I can't remember what it was, but he was basically like, oh, this thing Trump said is actually probably worth considering. He's like, he's like, oh, he actually made a good point here.
Even the stop the clock is right twice.
But yeah, exactly. And people lost their minds. I remember one guy literally tweeted, he's like, why is this person I respect so much saying something I disagree with so much? Like, they literally they weren't considering what he was saying at all. All they could see was, this person is saying something I disagree with.
Well, they would have looked up Trump correct,
Yeah.
and then would have just cracked their fingers and be like,
Exactly.
I am ready for an evening.
Yeah.
Smash the laptop.
Yeah.
Literally.
Smash it.
Yeah. And then for ages, I totally got left long. And for ages, I was like, oh, Malcolm Gladwell, yeah, sure, and then I looked into it, and I was like, no, he was right. I can't even remember what it was.
But the thing is, that is the problem. We're like, especially with social media, we're only containing ourselves to 142 characters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That we look at we look at this. You know, we always say never judge a book by its cover, but yet every day and on social media, every tweet we go past, we judge a book by its cover. If we even take, the argument with sugar, like that. Yeah, like if you take 20, 30 years ago, people were like, oh well, don't use fat, use sugar is good for you.
Yeah.
And now 20 years later we're like,
the whole thing with
both
food,
weren't, but like,
but food is a very good example, a very good case study to complement it, because there's so, like, you can find out, you could believe anything if you looked at studies on food. You could say that, I don't know, coffee is really, really good for you, or coffee is terrible for you, and they both seem to have the same amount of legitimacy.
but these studies are paid by those companies. Like those, and you know what I mean, and that is an experiment. I listened to a podcast there was a documentary on Netflix. It's called Game Changers.
Okay.
It's basically this guy who used to be a UFC fighter, and he decided that he was going to go vegan, plant-based diet completely.
Okay.
And he basically spoke to different athletes. So Nate Diaz, he's another UFC fighter, he's on plant-based diet.
Yeah.
Lewis Hamilton, a F1 driver, he's on plant-based diet.
Yeah.
And there's a guy, a strong weightlifter, really strong weightlifter. I think he's like lifted, I don't know how much, but he's a vegan as well. And they've spoken about the impacts, and they spoke about how how the meat industry has been fueling this research into saying that meat is extremely good for you. Now, I listened to the podcast actually, so this ties into what the podcast was about. The podcast was basically a scientist who was debating the guy, I think James Wilkes was his name. I'm not entirely sure. No, I don't think it was that. They were sitting down and they were discussing it anyways, but they were debating anyways the differences. But, trying to find concrete evidence that either side is correct or not is impossible. While the overlying issue, the overlying kind of synopsis is that a balanced diet is like the perfect diet as such, but also that everyone reacts differently to each food. So then you would need to tailor it to every.
Well, that's the thing. It's the same with social media. You were making the point earlier on that two people could look at the exact same feed and look at the same amount of time each day and have widely different outcomes. And that's why it's so hard to have any sort of like concrete conclusion that social media is good or bad for you. But what there is, like I saw in the studies, that there is a kind of terrifying increase in young people with mental health issues and depression and suicides as well since say the start of the millennium onwards. Like there's a big kind of trend upwards, and now like I'm not saying that that's 100% because of social media, but it's a convenient trend as well, like the rise in social media and internet use.
Yeah, we haven't really spoken about cyberbullying, because that's like a major issue. Like is still and always was a major issue. That with a platform like that, it is so free, but within that freedom, you're always going to have you could say hate crime, but like bullying, especially because other people are trying to, I think maybe I've heard this before, but like I don't know who I heard it from, but they used to say that back years and years ago, you knew, like if you were in school, if you're getting bullied in school, right, you knew that the time frame which you were going to get bullied from was 9 to 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once you got home, that was it. It was over.
It was a different life.
But nowadays,
It's constant.
it can happen in the middle of the night. You can have people like, you know what I mean? Like, I remember once on Twitter, I commented on a post somebody put up, and I just like, I think he got, I don't know why, it was years and years ago I said, but I replied to his comment anyways, but I kind of disagreed with him,
Yeah.
but like, I think what I said, and I looked at it afterwards, I was like, was kind of wrong,
Yeah.
but I got murdered.
Really.
Like, I just got people sending me like middle fingers, everything, like just everything, and you're just like, you're sitting back and you're saying,
Jeez.
there's people sitting here waiting to say that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And like, even I just took a step back from that and I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
like that's
But I think
crazy.
that ties into another thing like these days. I think people are waiting to be offended by stuff and they're waiting to react.
Mm.
And I feel like on social media people get a certain thrill
Yeah.
of just
Yeah.
reacting and playing that game and, you know,
yeah.
and getting one over on someone or you know, kind of abusing them. And
In London, there's every Sunday morning there's a stool, there's a kind of a stool, and I don't know, it's kind of basically you can get onto this stool anyways, and you can make a speech,
Yeah.
and just this is I think Speaker's Corner is what it's
is
called.
it in Camden Market? I think?
No, it's in Hyde Park. Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
So every Sunday morning, anyways, they do that. But it's been around since, I think Winston Churchill even spoke at this like
Yeah.
years ago. But even that sort of thing, you know what I mean? That is something that is, I think, you know, we've gotten so used to, okay, we'll get it home, we'll sit in our bed and we'll just rant, rather than actually, you know, imagine how different your rant would be if you were
Just to
standing.
debate someone face to face.
Yeah. But even if you're debating with someone and you're like, afterwards, you're just like, oh, that was a great discussion we
Yeah.
had. Rather than it being a debate,
Yeah.
like, we've gotten so caught up in this 1 versus 1 debate rather than actually just being a discussion.
Mm.
Do you know, if I say to you, okay, that the Dublin housing policy under Owen Murphy was flawless, but the only
Yeah.
problem was that we just didn't have enough time,
Yeah.
and you come back to me with just saying, oh well, under Owen Murphy there was X amount of houses built,
Mm.
even though that if you were to round under Owen O'Brien's policies, X amount of houses would have been built due to this.
Mm.
We can both walk away from saying that, saying, oh, yeah, that's fair,
Mm.
rather than you saying, oh well, I won and
Yeah.
Alan lost, so I'm better. It's like this kind of superiority even.
Yeah.
And I think humiliation is a powerful feeling. Like if you've
Yeah.
ever truly been humiliated.
Yeah. It's
I don't think like people online like to a certain extent you can, you know, plug off it a little bit,
Mm.
but you still are being humiliated and embarrassed and ashamed online.
Mm.
Yeah, like there's one comedian I was listening to, and he said that he never gets embarrassed because he said, I've had terrible gigs in front of 200 people
Yeah.
and they haven't said a thing. And like, I've been laughed off stage, or not laughed off stage, but people have just laughed. So I'm not going to get embarrassed if I say something wrong or if I fall over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So that's it. Like, it's, I think it all does tie in about how you are, like how your life experiences do also tailor your impact
Yeah.
and your exposure to those sort of things.
Yeah. Honestly, I think though as well, like, you'd honestly just miss being with people. I think, you know, it's more time spent, so, like, I especially think younger people as well, like, because they're on social media, think they don't need to meet up with their friends or something because they're talking to
Yeah.
them all the time. But like, just even being here, geez, you're tonic being like on your phone or something, you know,
Oh,
it's good
definitely,
just good to talk to people, like, you know.
So Kuhn and I were at we were kind of at we were kind of at an event, but we spoke to people, and like, I think we spoke to 3 or 4 or 5 people maybe. I think
Strangers now.
strangers we've never met before. We spoke to them for I think maybe 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
But like, it's very weird when you talk to somebody you've never met before,
Yeah.
and you sit down, you just pick their brain,
Yeah.
and you just get to see what they think. And some people find that extremely interesting, and some people don't.
Like it,
But at the same time, you know what I mean, that's what's great that about life in general, that
Yeah.
you can just pick people's brain, and that they'll just like, you know what I mean, you'll walk away from saying, oh well, now if I had a sat at home, or if I had a sat in my camping chair and not spoken to them, I wouldn't have experienced that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So that's like, that is extremely like, that's
it's not
why.
even to say that every single conversation you're going to have is going to be interesting. Like, they're not.
Oh yeah, you'll have
Yeah,
ones that you
of
just
course.
walk away from saying, I gain nothing from this,
Yeah.
or not gain nothing.
But they'll nearly always be at least more interesting or occupying than being at home and
Silent.
doing
Oh, yeah.
nothing. So
I remember when I was at a festival last summer and we were talking to this guy and I was giving out, saying to my friends that garam masala, like the spice, was really hard to come by, and I was like, I thought it was like a regular spice, really hard to find, and this guy beside me like, turned around and was like, yes, totally get you, and we were like going on and we were getting real intense with this, and his girlfriend just turned and she was just like, no, and basically just like, can you stop talking? Like she just wasn't in that buzz at all. Like, but at the same time, like I was just like, you know, you just get that sometimes.
That guy is like minutely, like that's one of his little passions, and he's gone home and like he maybe still you're still thinking about this now. And that's a year on.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? And that's.
And I don't think that his girlfriend would be like, no. Like I don't think that is a negative thing. I just thought the whole situation is a funny memory that she was just like no, and he was just like yes, you know, and it's just one of those things that you never get like over like you know working in Call of Duty talking to people. Like,
but I think that's even like that even comes into like the bigger picture that even like our effect on society is far more reaching than we could ever think. Like if we say something now, like if we have a discussion with somebody, they may be feeling down at the time, but if we have a discussion with them for an hour or two, they could walk home and be like, geez, that was a great night, so it was. Like, we had a great time. Do you mean that's how important like social aspects like that? And do you know what I mean? Like even like sitting down with each other and just chatting away and just like talking about, you may be talking about nothing, but you're talking about everything.
It's good.
Well, that's the thing about social media as well. It's very isolating.
Yeah, it's
very hard to get your point across through text.
It's true as well. What Johnny said was interesting, that you know, people think that they can substitute their time with people by texting. That's
I think COVID has made me really aware of that. That I was like, I should be fine. It's weird to video call people, and like video call is pales in comparison to actually talking to people.
Yeah, it's kind of horrendous. Like,
it's terrible. Well,
it's fine. Like it's grand. Better it's there than it's not.
Yeah.
Like even times that we've met up together, like since COVID, and we meet up, and we genuinely be in pain laughing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? From the second you get there till the second you leave, and you're just like. You wouldn't like you kind of half get that through Zoom, but you just like you can't like get, you know, the way when you just see the reaction like.
There's I might alienate some people here, but I have a funny metaphor in my head maybe about in digital systems, like you lose a bit of information because you have to represent everything as like a ones and zeros. It's like it's basically a thing, like if something's in between 1 and 0, you have to say it's either 1 or 0, so you lose information. Like it's kind of funny to think that maybe that has something to do with why when you're talking to someone over the internet that you're not quite getting everything. Like, it's not
you don't get the facial expression, you don't get the tone of voice, you don't get the kind of pauses, the hesitation, you know. You're
losing some bit of information that you need.
Could be crucial,
But that's even why I think once things open back up again, like that I think we should all make a concerted effort to even go to stuff like go to talks, go to like join forums and stuff like that. We may not like they're like. Thing is, like when you go to debates, is like seen as you have to speak your mind. There's nothing wrong with going through debates, sitting at the back and just listening. Do you know what I mean? So that's something that we really should do, because rather than viewing it from one or two perspectives, go to something, even if you talk to one or two people, and just like open up your mind. I think
that's another thing. People don't talk to each other in public.
Yeah.
Very, very rarely.
It depends where you live.
Yeah.
Not even, but like say if I think I was on the bus one time in Dublin. And there was this lad, like an old lad, and he was like just chatting away to people in the front, and I was like, oh jeez, like he's gonna start talking to me, like, and I was guilty of that myself. You know, I kind of stuck my headphones in, like was looking at his phone, just and like, you know, I'm not saying what he was saying was brilliant and
thought provoking or anything.
But you know, he was making an effort, but he was kind of innocent. He was naive nearly. Like he thought people would want to talk to him.
An example: I was walking home when I was in college. Was like, it was maybe during the winter, so it would have been October, November, and I was walking home from the shop, and I walked past this old man, like, and I walked past him, and this was in kind of a Slorgan area in Dublin, and I was walking past him, and I just smiled at him, and I was like, oh well, how's things? And his face lit up.
Yeah.
Like he just smiled as he walked past, because I'm pretty sure that 1 in 1,000 people would say that. Yeah. But even first when I came to Dublin, when I was, because in first year I was living in campus, of course, but in second year when I was walking to college, it'd be so strange walking past people and not acknowledging them, just being like head down, while like, you know what I mean, coming from like my ma being from Clare, where you literally, your hand is constantly waving, like you're just up and down. Same at home here, you're walking home, you're chatting to people, you're just like, oh well, how's things, like.
But at the same time, like, I mean, it is understandable that in the city, like, you're walking past so many people, like, you're not going to be able to be like,
Yeah.
oh, well,
Yeah.
how are you? Like,
Well,
you
you
know.
see
People
those
say-
moments when you're like walking home or something from a night out, and there's someone in the distance, and you're walking towards you for ages, and you just don't acknowledge each other.
Yeah.
It's really awkward because
So
you can't.
awkward. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just easy to just be like acknowledging from miles away. Like,
Yeah.
well, how are
But
things?
then they'd be like, it's freaked
Yeah,
out.
and then you're like, oh fuck, cross
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
road, like, yeah.
Interesting.
But like, yeah, I think we all shouldn't be really afraid to talk to each other, even if we're so-called strangers.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
you know, within reason, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, what is the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, and it's
Probably
such,
get decked.
such a thrill though. It's all, like, yeah.
You get good podcast content out of it, that's all I'm saying. Yeah, I
So at the end of our podcast, maybe what's our general verdict? Social media.
I'm now convinced to
Go
go
to
home
bed.
and delete all social media and just screw
The
it.
funny thing is, throughout this whole podcast, I was saying to myself, okay, at the end of this podcast, we're going to say, right, good luck, and we're going to then we're going to be in the position where we want people to listen to this. Well, we don't like you can listen to it if you want, the sole listener,
Yeah.
or maybe even two if we're lucky. But how do we get this across?
What do you mean?
And like, how do we actually get this? Like, how do we get people to listen to this podcast? And then I was like, oh, it's like nearly impossible to get this podcast to
of course it's
to the
social-
masses, to the masses without using
it's some platform.
some
Yeah.
platform. Isn't it crazy?
True,
Like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? But yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to get RTE and get it published like be on telly.
No,
that's,
we're-
that's the same.
look,
That's
you
just
never know.
social
Like,
media.
the Late Late Show is on the dive, so we
Friday
might
nights.
Friday nights at about 10 o'clock. You might see us.
The longest running chat to the world canned for a podcast.
You might see us in between the slot of the ads between the Renault ad and I don't know,
Fucking
some sort of Nivea ad.
Yeah.
You see us slotted in there for about 10 seconds because our budget is awfully low,
Painfully low.
painfully
Imagine
low.
just paying for an ad and it just like it just being like an exit, like a 10-second excerpt from your from the
The way,
podcast.
no, the way we do it, right? Speed it up unbelievably, like so our words are so fast. And what you have to do is you have to like record it. You have to be there at
Yeah.
the time, record it, and then slow it down, like by a factor of 20. Get the whole thing.
No, or like imagine if you had a billionaire that just genuinely didn't care and his idea was like, you know what, I'm just going to like flex on everyone, which probably goes against the grain of this whole conversation. But it was like, you know, the Super Bowl, probably the most expensive ad. He
Yeah.
just took up a good half of it.
Yeah.
Him just there,
Yeah.
sitting there, staring into the camera and just looking.
Yeah.
I've always thought if you ever became a billionaire, you should just do that.
Yeah.
Just pay the money.
Yeah.
Better than an ad for fucking detergent, because that's what 90% of the ads were the year I watched the Super Bowl.
Better than giving money to a pesky charity, am I right?
Well, I think that probably how long did we go for this podcast?
She's had no idea.
I have no idea. Well, that's the wrap up the second episode. You never know. This might be the last episode. That's the thing with this podcast. Every episode might be the last one. So, you know, what you could do is you could listen to this podcast backwards, and it actually has a completely different plot line.
Yeah. So there's 2 new podcasts.
Yes. So then, yeah, you're actually listening to 4 podcasts. So.
Maybe that we will keep in the podcast without the mic, so we don't feel the pressure of the mic there. We have more natural,
Yeah.
conversation. Maybe
So-
that's that.
So yeah, what we're
so
going to
when we
basically.
do the podcast, but you just won't be.
You'll
able to
never,
hear it.
if you want to hear us, bring us up.
Basically, look, what we're announcing is we're going on tour.
We want you to be there in the room with us.
We'll be in Castlebar on the 12th. We'll be in the
Carrigan Shannon.
we'll be in the board. Gosh, no seats, just buys. So that wraps up the podcast. Yeah, I don't know how to end this, but like
Thanks for
you
listening.
do. Thanks for listening.
Hope you enjoyed.
look.
Hope you got something out.
Yeah, hopefully you can walk away from this, go for a long old stroll, look up.
Leave the phone
Yeah.
home.
It's self-reflection.
Yes, serious self-reflection.
Delete your social media.
Delete it. But
this isn't, we're going to get off the bias of this being an unbiased
yeah,
app. We're 100% biased. Delete your social
It's bad for you.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah.
but delete the podcast. But apart from the app in which you use to listen to this podcast,
Yeah. Perfect.
keep that and turn on the notifications.
And
Give it a like.
support your local library.
Subscribe. Give us a bell.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, do support your local library.
Support
Read a
your local
book.
library. Yeah, read a book. Support your local cafe or pub
Stand on your head.
or local shops.
You could stand your head.
Get a bike.
Might do something for you.
Yeah,
Get a bike. Go on trails. go
Yeah.
on Greenways.
Greenways.
Yeah, the
Look.
Greenways.
Watch 4 movies in a row.
Show us some great content lately.
So just this next podcast is going to be sponsored by the Wild Atlantic Way. What else? Can't think of anything else.
That's it.
Yeah, we'll
Right,
call it a
well,
day at that.